8-year-old Sofia Rodriguez stood in the hospital cafeteria, her small hands gripping a crumpled piece of paper with an address scrawled in purple crayon. Her mother didn't know she was here. Her mother didn't know about the eviction notice hidden under Sofia's mattress, or the phone calls from people with scary voices demanding money, or how Sofia had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because Mama came home too tired to cook. What her mother definitely didn't know was that Sofia had spent 3 weeks watching the construction worker who fixed their apartment building's broken steps, learning his schedule, memorizing his kindness when he'd helped Mrs. Washington carry her groceries, and planning the most important conversation of her 8-year-old life. Marcus Thompson sat alone at a corner table, hard hat beside his coffee cup, shoulders heavy with the weight of divorce papers he'd signed that morning. He looked up to find a little girl with braided hair and serious brown eyes standing beside his chair like she'd been gathering courage for hours. "Mister," Sofia whispered, her voice barely audible above the cafeteria's afternoon bustle, "please marry my mother. She's all I've got left. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. He stared at this child who couldn't be older than his nephew, her face carrying a gravity that belonged to someone 3 times her age. The hospital cafeteria continued its mundane rhythm around them, nurses grabbing quick meals between shifts, doctors reviewing charts over sandwiches, visitors seeking comfort in vending machine coffee. But in this small pocket of fluorescent lighting, time seemed to pause for something extraordinary. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus set down his cup with deliberate care, the kind of gentleness reserved for fragile things. Sofia's grip tightened on her piece of paper. "My mama, Elena Rodriguez. She works here in the Heart Place upstairs. She's really good at taking care of people, and she makes the best scrambled eggs, and she knows all the words to Disney songs, even the old ones." The words tumbled out in a rush, as though she'd rehearsed them but feared losing her nerve. "She needs someone to help her, and you seem nice, and Mrs. Washington says nice men are hard to find." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking but opening. 3 hours ago, he'd sat in a lawyer's office listening to Jennifer's attorney explain why she deserved half of everything he'd built with his own hands. 3 hours ago, he'd wondered if he'd ever trust another person enough to share his life again. Now this child stood before him with a faith so pure it made his cynicism feel like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Sweetheart," he began, but Sofia held up her hand with the authority of someone who'd thought this through completely. "I know you don't know us yet, but I've been watching. You fixed Mr. Ramirez's door when he couldn't pay you right away. You helped Mrs. Washington with her groceries even though she's not your grandma. And yesterday, when Tommy Chun dropped his lunch money in the puddle, you gave him $5 and told him it was for being brave enough to ask for help." Sofia's eyes never left his face. "Mama says character is what you do when nobody's watching. But I was watching, and you have good character." The child's logic was flawless and heartbreaking. Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn into her earnest conviction. "Sofia, is it? That's a beautiful name. Can you tell me why you think your mama needs someone to help her?" Something flickered across Sofia's face, relief that he was listening, fear that she might say too wrong thing. She glanced around the cafeteria, then slid into the chair across from him with the seriousness of a business negotiation. "Mama works 2 jobs. Days here at the hospital, nights cleaning offices downtown. She thinks I don't know about the scary phone calls, but our walls are thin and I hear everything. The landlord man came yesterday with papers that made Mama cry after he left." Marcus felt his contractor's mind automatically calculating single mother, double shifts, overdue rent, an 8-year-old perceptive enough to recognize a crisis. He'd seen this story too many times in his line of work, family's one emergency. Away from losing everything they'd built. What about your daddy, honey, or your grandparents? Sofia's expression grew distant. Daddy died when I was 5. Heart attack, Mama says, but I think it was because he was sad all the time after he lost his job. Abuela lives in Mexico, and we can't afford to visit. Mama's parents. She shrugged with the matter-of-fact acceptance children develop when adults fail them. They didn't like Daddy because he wasn't the right kind of person, Mama says. They don't like us either. The pieces assembled themselves in Marcus's mind like a blueprint for heartbreak. Elena Rodriguez, widowed young, estranged from family, working herself into exhaustion to keep her daughter safe. A woman he'd never met but whose story already felt familiar, echoing in the hollow spaces of his own recent loss. Sofia, marriage isn't something people do just to help each other. It's about love, about choosing to build a life together, because you can't imagine being apart. But that's what I mean, Sofia said, her voice gaining strength. Mama loves people so much she forgets to love herself. She loves her patients, and she loves me, and she even loves Mrs. Washington's cranky cat. She has so much love, but nobody to give the best parts to. And you. She studied his face with unsettling perception. You look like someone who forgot how to be happy. The observation landed with surgical precision. Marcus had indeed forgotten happiness, lost it somewhere between Jennifer's accusations and the lawyer's paperwork and the empty house that echoed, with the ghosts of plans that would never materialize. But this child saw something in him that he'd forgotten existed: potential for joy, for partnership, for the kind of simple contentment that came from being needed by good people. Even if I wanted to help your mama, sweetheart, these things take time. People need to know each other, to understand each other's dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Sofia reached into her backpack and pulled out a notebook covered in unicorn stickers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She opened it to pages covered in careful 8-year-old handwriting, illustrations in colored pencil, and what appeared to be a comprehensive dossier on her mother's life. Elena Rodriguez, she read with the solemnity of a court reporter. Born February 14th, Valentine's Day, which Mama says means she was destined to love people. Favorite color is yellow because it reminds her of sunshine. Allergic to shellfish but not regular fish. Drinks her coffee with lots of milk and 1 sugar. Always cries during movies, even the happy parts. Sings in Spanish when she thinks nobody's listening. And her voice is pretty like the lady on the radio. Marcus found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. You've been planning this for a while. 3 weeks, Sofia confirmed. Ever since I heard Mama crying on the phone with someone about money. I made a list of all the good men in our neighborhood, and you were the only one who wasn't already married or too old or mean to kids. She flipped to another page. Here's what I know about you. Marcus Thompson builds things and fixes things. Drives the blue truck with the dent in the side. Always says good morning to people, even when they don't say it back. Buys coffee for the homeless man who sits by the bank every Tuesday. The depth of her observation struck him silent. In 3 weeks, this child had cataloged his character with the thoroughness of a detective and the hope of someone desperate for a miracle. She'd watched him the way children watch adults when their world depends on finding one good person in a sea of indifference. Sofia, honey, where does your mama think you are right now? At the hospital daycare. She thinks I'm doing homework, but I finished it at lunch so I could come find you. Sofia's practical tone suggested this level of strategic thinking was routine for her. She gets off work in 2 hours, and then she has to run to her other job. She won't know I was gone unless someone tells her. Marcus checked his watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. His crew had finished early today. leaving him with empty hours he'd planned to fill with the mindless task of packing Jennifer's remaining belongings. Instead, he sat across from a child whose faith in humanity had somehow survived circumstances that would crush most adults. What if I said yes? The words emerged before he'd consciously decided to speak them. What if I said I'd like to meet your mama, get to know her, see if maybe we could help each other? Sofia's face transformed, hope blazing like sunrise after the longest night. Really? You mean it? You're not just saying that to make me stop bothering you. I mean it. But, Sofia, we have to do this the right way. Your mama needs to choose this for herself, not because her daughter made arrangements behind her back. People need to fall in love on their own timeline, in their own way. So you'll try? You'll really try to love her? The question hung between them, weighted with a child's understanding that love could be both choice and chance, effort and grace. Marcus thought about Elena Rodriguez, this woman he'd never met who raised daughters wise enough to recognize good character and desperate enough to ask strangers for miracles. I'll try, he said quietly. But I need you to promise me something. No more secret plans, no more matchmaking schemes. If your mama and I are going to have a chance, it has to happen honestly. Sofia nodded vigorously, then hesitated. What? If she says no? What if she thinks I'm being silly? Then we respect her choice. But Sofia, maybe the real question is, what if she says yes? For the first time since she'd approached his table, Sofia looked like the 8-year-old she was hopeful. Scared, dreaming of possibilities too big for her small hands to hold. Then maybe Mama won't cry at night anymore. And maybe you won't look sad when you think nobody's watching. And maybe we could be a real family instead of just people trying not to disappear. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since before his marriage imploded. This child had seen through his carefully maintained composure to the loneliness underneath, had recognized a kindred spirit in the midst of her own crisis. Maybe healing didn't always come from time and solitude. Maybe sometimes it came from small girls with big hearts who believed in the possibility of second chances. All right, Sofia Rodriguez, let's go meet your mama. They walked together through the hospital corridors, Sofia's small hand tucked trustingly into his larger one. Two people carrying each other's hopes toward an uncertain but suddenly brighter future. The fluorescent lights seemed warmer now, the institutional walls less imposing. Somewhere on the cardiac unit, Elena Rodriguez was finishing her shift, unaware that her daughter had just set in motion a sequence of events that would change everything. As they waited for the elevator, Sofia looked up at him with the wisdom that only comes from learning too young, that adults don't always keep their promises. Marcus, even if this doesn't work out the way I want, thank you for listening. Most grown-ups pretend they can't hear kids when we say important things. I heard you, sweetheart. Loud and clear. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside together, riding toward whatever came next with the peculiar courage of people who'd already survived the worst and dared to hope for something better. Sofia squeezed his hand once, a silent reminder that some of life's most important moments begin with a child's simple faith that good people exist, and that sometimes, if you're brave enough to ask, they'll say yes. The cardiac unit at Millfield General hummed with quiet efficiency, monitors beeping softly like electronic lullabies, nurses moving between rooms with practiced grace. Elena Rodriguez emerged from room 314, her scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, dark hair escaping from its ponytail in wisps that framed her tired face. She carried herself with the particular exhaustion of someone who gave everything to her work and saved nothing for herself, shoulders curved inward as though protecting something fragile in her chest. Marcus stood at the nurse's station beside Sofia, watching Elena organize charts with methodical precision. Even from a distance, he could see the care she took with each patient file, the way she double-checked medication notes, the gentle manner in which she spoke to the elderly man shuffling past with his walker. This was a woman who treated other people's pain as seriously as her own, who found purpose in healing even when her own wounds remained unattended. Sofia tugged at his sleeve. That's her. That's my mama. Elena looked up from her charts, scanning the hallway with the automatic vigilance of a mother who'd learned to account for her child's whereabouts at all times. Her gaze found Sofia, and her expression shifted from professional composure to confused concern. Mia, what are you doing up here? You're supposed to be in daycare until I finish. Elena's voice carried the particular tension of a parent who'd been managing crisis for so long that unexpected changes triggered immediate anxiety. Sofia took a deep breath, the kind children take before admitting they've broken something valuable. Mama, I need to tell you something important. This is Marcus Thompson. He's the man who fixed our steps, and he's very nice, and I asked him to meet you. Elena's eyes shifted to Marcus, taking in his work clothes, his gentle expression, the way he stood slightly behind Sofia, as though giving the child space to handle her own introduction. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Sofia, what exactly did you ask Mr. Thompson? The corridor suddenly felt too small, too public for the conversation they needed to have. Marcus stepped forward, his voice low and respectful. Mrs. Rodriguez, maybe we could find somewhere private to talk. Your daughter has something she needs to explain, and I think you deserve to hear it properly. Elena's nurse training kicked in, assessing the situation with professional calm, even as maternal worry flickered in her eyes. She studied Marcus's face, searching for signs of threat or deception, finding instead the kind of steady honesty that made people trust him with their broken doors and injured hearts. There's a family conference room down the hall, she said finally. Sofia, you're not in trouble, but we need to have a serious conversation about talking to strangers. They walked in silence, Sofia between the two adults like a small diplomat, navigating delicate negotiations. The conference room was sterile and windowless, designed for delivering bad news and difficult decisions. Elena closed the door and turned to face them, crossing her arms in the universal posture of a mother preparing for explanations. All right, Mia, tell me what's going on. Sofia looked up at Marcus, seeking encouragement, then back at her mother. Mama, I know about the eviction notice. I know about the phone calls from the mean people who want money. I know you cry after you think I'm asleep, and I know you're working yourself sick trying to take care of us. Elena's composure cracked slightly, surprise and pain competing across her features. Sofia, honey, those are grown-up problems. You don't need to worry about. But I do worry, Sofia interrupted, her voice gaining strength. You're all I have, Mama. If something happens to you, what happens to me? So I made a plan. I watched all the good men in our neighborhood, and Mr. Marcus is the best one. He's kind and he works hard, and he doesn't have a family to take care of, so maybe he could help take care of us. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at her daughter with a mixture of horror and heartbreak, finally understanding the weight this child had been carrying alone. Marcus felt like an intruder in their private pain, yet somehow essential to whatever healing might come next. Sofia, Elena whispered, you can't just ask people to marry your mother. That's not how life works. Why not? Sofia's question was genuinely curious, lacking any understanding of adult complications. You always say that good people help each other, and that family is what you make it, not just what you're born with. Mr. Marcus needs a family, and we need help. It makes sense. Elena sank into one of the conference room chairs, suddenly looking every one of her 32 years plus several more. Mia, marriage isn't about making sense. It's about love, about choosing someone because you can't imagine living without them. Marcus found his voice, speaking carefully into the charged atmosphere. Mrs. Rodriguez, I want you to know that I didn't encourage this. Your daughter approached me about an hour ago with a proposal that caught me completely off guard. But I have to say, in 35 years of living, I've never met anyone with a clearer understanding of what matters than Sofia. Elena looked at him properly for the first time, seeing past the work clothes to the person underneath. And what did you tell her? I told her that people need to fall in love on their own timeline, in their own way. But I also told her I'd like to meet you, to see if maybe we could help each other through whatever we're both facing. You don't know anything about what I'm facing, Elena said, but without hostility. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting alone for too long. Marcus chose his words carefully. I know you're working 2 jobs to keep your daughter safe. I know you're dealing with financial pressure that would break most people. I know you're raising a child who's wise enough to recognize good character and brave enough to ask for help when her family needs it. And I know that whatever you're facing, you're handling it with more grace than I managed when my own life fell apart. Something shifted in Elena's expression, curiosity replacing defensiveness. Your life fell apart? 3 months ago. 15-year marriage ended when my wife decided she wanted someone with more ambition and fewer calluses. Turned out the life we'd built together was mostly her vision with my labor. I've been trying to figure out what comes next ever since. Elena studied his hands, noting the permanent stains under his fingernails, the small scars that came from years of honest work. I'm sorry. Divorce is. It's like having surgery without anesthesia. Everything hurts for a long time after. How would you know? The question came out gentler than he'd intended. Because losing Carlos felt like that. Not divorce, but death. One day we were making plans for Sofia's 6th birthday party, and the next day I was planning his funeral. The world keeps moving, but you feel like you're walking through water, trying to catch up to a life that doesn't include you anymore. Sofia had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention children give to adult conversations that might determine their fate. Now she spoke up, her voice small but determined. See? You both understand about hearts being broken. Maybe together you could figure out how to fix them. Elena reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing gently. Corazon, it's not that simple. Mr. Thompson is a nice man, but Marcus, he corrected softly. And actually, maybe it could be that simple. Not marriage, not right away, but friendship, support, 2 people helping each other through difficult times while your daughter gets to see what it looks like when adults solve problems together instead of struggling alone. Elena was quiet. For a long moment, considering possibilities she'd been too tired to imagine. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we start with dinner. Tomorrow night, if you're free. Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk without the pressure of medical equipment or 8-year-old matchmakers. He glanced at Sofia with gentle humor. Your daughter has already done the hard work of introductions. Maybe we could take it from there and see what develops naturally. What if nothing develops? What if we're completely incompatible? Then Sofia learns that sometimes good people try their best and it doesn't work out, but that trying itself has value. And maybe we both gain a friend, which is more than either of us had this morning. Elena looked between Marcus and Sofia, seeing hope in her daughter's eyes and something like possibility in this stranger's face. She thought about the eviction notice hidden under Sofia's mattress, about the second job that was slowly killing her, about the loneliness that had become so familiar she'd stopped noticing it until this moment when its absence felt like sudden warmth. One dinner, she said finally. But Sofia, we need to have a long talk about boundaries and appropriate ways to help Mama solve problems. Sofia nodded eagerly. Does this mean Mr. Marcus can come to dinner tomorrow? It means Marcus can come to dinner tomorrow, Elena confirmed, and something in her voice suggested she was surprising herself with the decision. Marcus felt a flutter of nervous excitement he hadn't experienced since high school. Is there anything I should know? Food allergies, preferences, things to avoid talking about? I'm vegetarian 3 days a week because meat's expensive. Elena said with the matter-of-fact honesty of someone too tired for pretense. Sofia will want to show you every drawing she's ever made. And I can't cook anything fancy because our kitchen is the size of a closet and half the appliances don't work. I can bring groceries, Marcus offered. I'm actually a decent cook. When I have someone to cook for. You don't have to. I want to. It's been months since I cooked for anyone but myself. I'd forgotten how much I missed it. Elena found herself almost smiling, the expression feeling rusty from disuse. All right, tomorrow at 6. Riverside Apartments, Building C, Unit 247. I'll be there. Sofia bounced slightly on her toes, barely containing her excitement. This is going to be perfect. Mama, you're going to love him. He knows how to fix things, and you're always saying our apartment needs fixing. Elena stood, suddenly aware that her shift had ended 20 minutes ago and her second job started in less than 2 hours. Speaking of fixing things, I need to get home and change before I'm late for work. Sofia, thank you for caring enough to try to help, but next time we discuss family decisions together, okay? Okay, Mama. But this was a good plan, right? Elena looked at Marcus, this man who'd agreed to have dinner with strangers because a child had asked him to consider loving her mother. Ask me tomorrow night, Mia. As they walked back through the hospital corridors, Marcus found himself studying Elena's profile, noting the determined set of her jaw, the way she automatically checked room numbers as they passed, ensuring her patients were settled for the evening shift change. This was a woman who took responsibilities seriously, who cared for others even when she was running on empty herself. Mrs. Rodriguez, he said as they reached the elevator. Elena, thank you for giving this a chance. I know it's unconventional. Thank you for listening to her, Elena replied. Not many adults take children seriously when they're trying to solve big problems. Your daughter sees things clearly. Maybe because she hasn't learned yet that some problems are supposed to be impossible to solve. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside together. Sofia pressed the button for the ground floor with the satisfaction of someone whose careful planning had exceeded all expectations. Mama, she said as the doors closed, do you think Mr. Marcus could teach me how to use tools? Mrs. Washington says girls should know how to fix things too. Elena glanced at Marcus, who was trying not to smile at the child's transparent attempt to extend his involvement in their lives. We'll see, Mia. Let's start with dinner and see how it goes. But as the elevator descended, Elena found herself wondering what it would be like to have someone else carry part of the load, to share the weight of decisions and responsibilities that had been hers alone for 3 years. The thought was both terrifying and seductive, like standing at the edge of deep water and wondering if she remembered how to swim. Tomorrow night would tell them whether Sofia's plan was the wishful thinking of a child or the beginning of something none of them had dared to hope for. For now, it was enough that they were willing to try, that 3 strangers had agreed to sit around a table and see if they could build something together from the broken pieces of their separate lives. As they reached the ground floor and stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, Sofia slipped her hand into Elena's, then reached for Marcus's hand with her free one, creating a bridge between 2 adults who'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than their individual struggles. Tomorrow, Sofia said with the confidence of someone whose faith had been rewarded, everything starts getting better. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand, hoping desperately that Sofia was right, that sometimes the most important changes begin with a child's simple belief that good people exist and that families can be built as well as born. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, for the first time in months, Elena Rodriguez would go to sleep believing that maybe, just maybe, they weren't going to face those challenges alone. Marcus walked them to Elena's car, an aging Honda with a dent in the passenger door and a backseat full of Sofia's school projects. As Elena buckled her daughter into the booster seat, he found himself memorizing details, the way she double-checked the seatbelt, the gentle kiss she pressed to Sofia's forehead, the tired grace with which she handled the simple rituals of motherhood. 6 o'clock tomorrow, Elena said, meeting his eyes over the car roof. 6 o'clock, he confirmed. As they drove away, Marcus stood in the hospital parking lot, watching their taillights disappear into traffic, feeling something shift inside his chest. 3 hours ago, he'd been a divorced contractor with no plans beyond packing his ex-wife's belongings. Now he was a man with a dinner invitation, and the peculiar sense that his life had just taken a turn towards something unexpected and potentially wonderful. He thought about Sofia's notebook full of observations, about Elena's exhausted kindness, about the way they'd looked at him not as a stranger, but as a possibility. Tomorrow night, 3 people would sit around a small table and begin the delicate work of discovering whether friendship could grow into something deeper, whether 2 broken hearts could heal each other, whether a child's faith in the power of love could transform 3 separate lives into one shared story. The sun was setting over Millfield, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Marcus climbed into his blue truck with the dent in the side and drove home to an empty house that might not be empty much longer, carrying with him the echo of a little girl's voice asking him to believe in second chances, and the memory of a woman brave enough to say yes to the unknown. The next evening arrived with the kind of November chill that made everything feel sharper, more immediate. Marcus stood outside Riverside Apartments clutching grocery bags and fighting nerves he hadn't felt since his first job interview. The complex sprawled across 3 blocks of aging brick buildings, laundry hanging from fire escapes like prayer flags, children's bicycles chained to railings despite the approaching winter. This was a place where people lived because they had to, not because they wanted to, but where they'd built community anyway through shared struggles and small kindnesses. Building C looked exactly like buildings A and B, distinguished only by the faded letter painted beside the entrance and the slightly more optimistic flower boxes someone had attempted on the second-floor balconies. Marcus climbed to the second floor, his work boots echoing in the concrete stairwell, past doors marked with numbers and the muffled sounds of other people's lives. Television programs in languages he couldn't identify, a baby crying, someone practicing violin with more enthusiasm than skill. Unit 247 sat at the end of the hallway, its door painted a cheerful yellow that had probably been Elena's attempt to bring sunshine into institutional beige. Before he could knock, the door swung open to reveal Sofia in a dress that looked suspiciously formal for a Tuesday night dinner. "You came," she said, as though there had been genuine doubt despite his promise. "I said I would." Marcus held up the grocery bags. "I brought ingredients for vegetarian lasagna and chocolate chip cookies. I figured your mama might need some dessert after the week she's had." Sofia's eyes widened. "You can make cookies?" "Real ones, not the kind from a tube. Real ones. My grandmother's recipe. She always said you could judge a person's character by whether they'd share their cookie recipe freely." "I'm definitely going to need that recipe," came Elena's voice from inside the apartment. She appeared behind Sofia, hair loose around her shoulders, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better years, but still managed to make her look younger, less burdened than she had in her scrubs. "Come in, please. Fair warning, our place is small, but it's clean and the heat works most of the time." Marcus stepped into a living space that could have fit inside his kitchen back home, but which had been arranged with the kind of thoughtful efficiency that comes from making the most of what you have. A small sofa faced a television that was clearly older than Sofia. Bookshelves made from boards and concrete blocks held an impressive collection of library books and Sofia's artwork. And everything was spotlessly clean despite showing the wear of years of careful use. "This is nice," Marcus said, and meant it. The apartment radiated the warmth that comes from being truly lived in, love despite its limitations. "You've made it feel like home." "Mama says home is about the people, not the place," Sofia announced, trailing behind them as Elena led the way to the kitchen. The kitchen was indeed tiny, barely large enough for two people to move around each other without bumping. But Elena had maximized every inch of space with hooks for utensils, magnetic strips for knives, and shelves that reached to the ceiling. The refrigerator was covered with Sofia's drawings and school papers, a visual timeline of 8 years of childhood achievement and imagination. "I have to warn you," Elena said, opening the grocery bags with curiosity. "I'm not used to men who actually cook. Carlos could barely manage cereal without burning something. My ex-wife considered heating up frozen dinners to be gourmet cooking," Marcus replied, unpacking ingredients with the ease of someone comfortable in kitchens. "I started cooking in self-defense, then discovered I actually enjoyed it. There's something satisfying about creating something nourishing from basic ingredients." Sofia perched on one of the 2 kitchen stools, shin in her hands, watching the adults navigate around each other in the small space. "Are you going to cook together? Mama always says too many cooks spoil the broth, but maybe too many cooks make better dinner." Elena laughed, the sound lighter than Marcus had heard from her yesterday. "Your logic is questionable, Mia, but your optimism is admirable." As they began preparing dinner, Marcus found himself studying Elena's movements, noting the practiced efficiency with which she chopped vegetables, the way she automatically checked the stove temperature, the gentle corrections she offered when Sofia wanted to help. This was a woman who'd learned to do everything herself, but who still made space for her daughter's enthusiasm, even when it slowed things down. "So tell me about your work," Elena said, handing him a cutting board. "Sofia says you fix things and build things, but that covers a lot of territory." Marcus began dicing onions with the steady rhythm of someone who'd cooked countless meals alone. "Thompson and Miller Construction. We mostly do residential renovations, some commercial repair work. I started out working for other people, saved every penny for 15 years to buy my own equipment and truck. Jake Miller joined me 3 years ago when his previous boss stiffed him on a 6-month project. That must have been scary, starting your own business." "Terrifying," Marcus admitted, "but also the best decision I ever made. There's something about building something with your own hands, about taking a broken space and making it beautiful again. Every job is different. Every problem requires a unique solution." Sofia bounced slightly on her stool. "Could you fix our bathroom sink? It makes scary noises when Mama turns on the water." "Sofia," Elena warned, "Mr. Marcus didn't come here to get a honey-do list." "Actually, I'd be happy to take a look at it," Marcus sighed. "I carry basic tools in my truck, and sink problems are usually pretty straightforward. You don't have to do that. We're managing fine. I know you are. But sometimes managing and thriving are different things, and maybe friends can help bridge that gap." The word hung in the air between them. Friends. It felt both tentative and hopeful, a possibility that carried less pressure than romance, but more connection than polite acquaintance. "Is that what we are?" Elena asked, layering lasagna noodles with careful precision. "Friends? I'd like to be, if you're open to it." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering the offer and its implications. "I haven't had many friends since Carlos died. It's hard to maintain relationships when you're working 80 hours a week and trying to be everything your child needs." "What about before? Did you and Carlos have a good circle of people?" Something flickered across Elena's face, a shadow of old pain. "Carlos had friends from work, guys who came over to watch football and drink beer. I had some girlfriends from nursing school, but they all married doctors or lawyers, moved to the suburbs, started having dinner parties I couldn't afford to reciprocate. After he died, people sent casseroles for a few weeks, then life moved on. Grief makes people uncomfortable when it lasts longer than they think it should." Marcus felt the familiar sting of recognition. Jennifer's friends basically vanished when she left. Turns out they were her friends who tolerated me, not our friends who cared about both of us. It's amazing how quickly you can go from having A full social calendar to spending weekends alone wondering if anyone would notice if you just disappeared. Sofia had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention children give to adult conversations that reveal important truths about the world. Is that why you both looked sad before? Because you didn't have enough friends? Alina reached over to smooth her daughter's hair. Partly, Mia. When you lose someone important, whether through death or divorce, it changes how you see everything. You realize how much of your happiness depended on one person, and you have to learn how to be okay by yourself. But you don't have to be by yourself anymore, Sofia pointed out with 8-year-old logic. You have each other now. Marcus and Alina exchanged glances over the child's head, both recognizing the weight of hope Sofia was placing on this fragile beginning. The pressure could have been crushing, but instead it felt like encouragement, a reminder that healing didn't always have to be a solitary process. We're taking it one day at a time, sweetheart, Alina said. Sometimes the best things grow slowly. They finished preparing dinner in comfortable silence, the small kitchen filling with the warm sense of garlic and herbs and melting cheese. Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't expected, soothed by the simple domesticity of shared tasks, by Sofia's chatter about school and friends, by Alina's quiet competence as she orchestrated the meal despite the limited space. When they finally sat down to eat at the small table, Elena had moved from the kitchen to the living room. Marcus was struck by how natural it felt, how easily they'd fallen into the rhythms of a family dinner, despite being virtual strangers. Sofia insisted on lighting a candle she'd made in art class. Elena poured water into mismatched glasses, and Marcus served the lasagna onto plates that had probably come from a thrift store, but which held the food with equal dignity. "This is delicious," Alina said after her first bite. "I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me." "You cook for people all day at work," Sofia pointed out. "That's different, Mia. At work, I'm taking care of people because it's my job. This is," she paused, searching for words. "This is someone choosing to take care of us because they want to. It feels different." Marcus felt something warm expand in his chest. I'd forgotten how much I missed having people to cook for. Food tastes better when you're sharing it with people you care about. "Do you care about us already?" Sofia asked with characteristic directness. The question was innocent enough, but it carried implications that made both adults suddenly aware of the ground they were treading. Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I care about your happiness," he said finally. "I care about your mama having support when she needs it, and I care about you feeling safe and loved. Whether that's friendship or something more, time will tell. But yes, Sofia, I already care about what happens to both of you." Alina's eyes softened, something in her expression shifting from cautious hope to tentative trust. That's more than most people would be willing to admit after one dinner." "Maybe because most people are afraid of being honest about what they need," Marcus replied. "I've spent 3 months pretending I was fine being alone, telling myself I didn't need anyone else's complications. But sitting here with you and Sofia, I realize how much I've missed having people in my life who matter." Sofia beamed as though her matchmaking efforts had been vindicated. "I knew you were the right person. I told Mama you had a good heart." "Your daughter is an excellent judge of character," Marcus said to Elena. "She saw things in me that I'd forgotten about myself. She has that gift," Elena agreed. "Sometimes I think she understands people better than adults do. Kids haven't learned yet that it's safer to assume the worst." As they continued eating, the conversation flowed with surprising ease. Elena talked about her patience, the satisfaction she found in helping people heal even when her own healing felt incomplete. Marcus shared stories about renovation projects, about elderly homeowners who became friends, about the particular joy of restoring something beautiful that others had written off as beyond saving. Sofia contributed her own observations about school, about her teacher Mrs. Patterson who smelled like peppermint and always had Band-Aids for skinned knees, About her best friend Maya, whose parents were getting divorced and who cried during lunch sometimes. Through the child's innocent chatter, Marcus and Elena began to understand each other's daily realities, the networks of small relationships and responsibilities that shaped their lives. When dinner was finished and they'd moved to making cookies together, Marcus found himself watching Elena teach Sofia how to measure flour properly, noting the patience in her voice, the way she made even mundane tasks feel special through attention and care. This was a woman who'd learned to find joy in small moments, who created warmth and security for her daughter even when her own life felt uncertain. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena said, leaning against the counter while Sofia carefully spooned cookie dough onto baking sheets. "Of course. When your marriage ended, how did you keep going? How did you get up every morning and put one foot in front of the other when everything you'd planned for was gone?" Marcus considered the question, remembering those first terrible weeks when grief and anger had made even simple tasks feel insurmountable. "I'm not sure I did keep going at first. I went through the motions, worked because I had to, came home and sat in rooms that felt like museums of my former life. But eventually, I realized that Jennifer leaving had revealed something important. The life we'd built together was mostly her vision executed with my labor. I'd never really asked myself what I wanted, what would make me happy independent of someone else's dreams. And what did you discover? That I want to build things that last. Not just houses and kitchens, but relationships, community, the kind of life where people take care of each other because they choose to, not because they have to. I want to wake up every morning knowing that what I do matters to people I love." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "I've been so focused on survival that I'd almost forgotten about actually living. Getting through each day became the goal instead of building towards something better." "Maybe that's enough for now," Marcus said gently. "Maybe survival is the first step, and dreaming comes later when you feel safe enough to hope for more." "I'd like to hope for more," Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sofia deserves a mother who believes good things are possible, not just someone who's trying not to let everything fall apart." Marcus stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her admission. "You're already giving her everything she needs. Sofia is confident and kind and brave enough to ask strangers for help when her family needs it. That doesn't happen by accident. That's the result of a mother who loves completely and sacrifices endlessly. Sometimes I worry it's not enough, that I'm failing her by not being able to provide the stability she deserves. Elena, you're raising a child who sees good in people, who believes problems can be solved, who has enough faith in love to try to arrange her mother's happiness. If that's failure, then the world needs more failures like you." Tears gathered in Elena's eyes, the first Marcus had seen her allow herself. "I don't know how to do this. How to let someone else care about us. How to trust that you won't decide. We're too much work and disappear." "I don't know how to do it either," Marcus admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe we can take it one dinner, one conversation, one small step at a time until trusting each other feels less scary than staying alone." Sofia looked up from her cookie decorating, sensing the emotional weight of the conversation, even if she didn't understand all the words. "Are you okay, Mama? You look like you're going to cry." Elena wiped her eyes and smiled at her daughter. "I'm okay, Mia. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy, not just when they're sad. Are you happy?" Elena looked around her small apartment, at the man who'd spent his evening cooking for strangers, at the daughter who'd orchestrated this entire evening out of love and hope. "Yes, sweetheart. For the first time in a very long time, I think I am." The cookies finished baking as the evening wound down, filling the small apartment with the scent of vanilla and chocolate chips, and something that felt very much like home. Marcus insisted on doing the dishes despite Elena's protests. Sofia supervised from her perch on the counter, and slowly the three of them settled into the comfortable rhythms of people who decided to trust each other with something precious. When it came time for Marcus to leave, Sofia hugged him with the unself-conscious affection of a child who'd gotten exactly what she'd hoped for. "Will you come back soon? If your mama wants me to." Elena walked into the door, suddenly shy in the way people become when an evening has exceeded all expectations. "Thank you for tonight. For the groceries, for cooking, for listening to Sofia's crazy plan and taking it seriously. Thank you for giving me a chance to be part of something again," Marcus replied. "I'd forgotten how good it feels to have people to come home to. Is that what this is? Coming home?" Marcus considered the question, looking back at the warm light spilling from the apartment, at Sofia waving from the kitchen window, at Elena's face soft with hope and possibility. Maybe, or maybe it's the beginning of building a new home together. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her face. From merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "I'd like to find out." "So would I." "Same time next week? It's a date. It's a dinner." Elena laughed at her own confusion. "Yes, same time next week." Marcus walked down the concrete stairs and across the parking lot to his truck, feeling lighter than he had in months. Behind him, the apartment building hummed with the lives of dozens of families, each unit containing its own collection of hopes and struggles and small victories. But in Unit 247, 3 people had begun the careful work of building something new from the pieces of their individual stories, something that might grow into the kind of love that chose itself freely and held on fiercely. As he drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield, Marcus found himself already planning next week's menu, already looking forward to Sofia's chatter and Elena's quiet observations and the particular warmth that came from being wanted. From being chosen by people who saw his flaws and decided to care about him anyway. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight had proven that sometimes the most important changes begin with a child's faith in the possibility of love and 2 adults brave enough to believe that broken things can be mended, that lonely people can become family, and that the best gifts often come disguised as the most unexpected requests. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Sofia had been writing in her head, each dinner creating new chapters in a story she'd dared to imagine but never quite believed would come true. Marcus arrived every Tuesday and Friday evening with groceries and tool bags, fixing the bathroom sink that had wheezed like an old man, replacing the kitchen faucet that sprayed water in unpredictable directions, and installing a deadbolt that actually worked instead of the broken lock Elena had been jiggling for 2 years. But more than the repairs, he brought laughter back into their small apartment. He taught Sofia how to measure twice and cut once, explaining the logic behind construction while she held flashlights and handed him screwdrivers with the seriousness of a surgical assistant. He listened to Elena's stories about difficult patients and hospital politics, offering the kind of steady attention she'd forgotten existed. Slowly, carefully, they were building something together that felt stronger than friendship, but gentler than the desperate love Sofia had originally requested. On this particular Friday evening, Marcus was installing new cabinet handles in the kitchen while Sofia worked on homework at the table and Elena prepared for her weekend shift. The domestic rhythm had become so natural that none of them noticed. When the apartment manager's key turned in the lock, when heavy footsteps crossed the living room, when a man in an expensive suit appeared in the kitchen doorway like a storm cloud blocking out sunlight. "Mrs. Rodriguez," the man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to intimidating people who couldn't fight back. "I'm Harold Peterson from Child Protective Services. I'm here for an unannounced welfare check." The screwdriver slipped from Marcus's hand, clattering to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Elena froze at the stove, her face draining of color as every working mother's worst nightmare materialized in her kitchen. Sofia looked up from her math worksheet, confusion and fear warring in her expression as she tried to understand why a stranger had walked into their home uninvited. "I wasn't aware there was any concern about Sofia's welfare," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could see in her hands. She's healthy, happy, doing well in school, and has never missed a doctor's appointment or vaccination. Peterson consulted a tablet with the air of a man performing a distasteful but necessary duty. We received a report that this child has been approaching strangers in public spaces, specifically asking men to marry her mother. This behavior raises concerns about supervision, appropriate boundaries, and the child's emotional stability. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as the pieces clicked into place. Someone had seen Sofia at the hospital, had misunderstood her desperate attempt to help her family, and had reported what looked like a child in crisis. The bureaucratic machine had started grinding, and now this family that had just begun to heal was facing the ultimate threat. Who made this report? Elena asked, moving instinctively closer to Sofia, who had abandoned her homework and was staring at Peterson with the wide-eyed terror of a child who'd heard enough adult conversations to understand that men in suits could take children away from their mothers. That information is confidential. However, the report indicates that the child approached multiple men before finding someone willing to engage with her request. This pattern suggests significant distress and inappropriate coping mechanisms. Sofia stood up from the table, her small frame somehow conveying dignity despite her obvious fear. I didn't approach multiple men. I watched lots of people to find the right one, but I only asked Mr. Marcus because he was the best person I could find, and it worked. Mama's happier now, and we're not scared about money anymore, and nobody's crying at night. Peterson's expression didn't soften at the child's explanation. Nevertheless, children should not be placed in situations where they feel responsible for their parents' emotional or financial well-being. This level of adult responsibility is inappropriate for an 8-year-old. Marcus stepped forward, his contractor's instincts kicking in as he assessed the situation like a structural problem that needed solving. Mr. Peterson, I understand your concern, but you're seeing this situation through the wrong lens. Sofia wasn't exhibiting dangerous behavior or poor judgment. She was demonstrating remarkable maturity and problem-solving skills. And you are? Marcus Thompson. Sofia approached me 3 weeks ago, and since then I've gotten to know this family. Elena is an exceptional mother working herself to exhaustion to provide for her daughter. Sofia is a bright, well-adjusted child who recognized that her mother needed support and took action to find it. What you're calling inappropriate behavior, I call courage. Peterson made notes on his tablet with mechanical precision. Are you residing in this apartment, Mr. Thompson? No, I have my own place. Across town. But you're here regularly? 2 or 3 times a week. I bring groceries, help with household repairs, spend time with both Alana and Sofia. And what is the nature of your relationship with Mrs. Rodriguez? Elena and Marcus exchanged glances, suddenly aware that their careful, gradual approach to building something together could be weaponized against them. They hadn't defined what they were beyond friendship, hadn't rushed into labels or legal commitments, but now their caution might be interpreted as instability or inappropriate boundaries. We're friends, Elena said finally. Close friends who care about each other and are exploring the possibility of something more. Are you providing financial support to this family? I bring groceries when I come for dinner. I've fixed some things around the apartment that needed attention. Nothing beyond what friends do for each other. Peterson's questions continued, with relentless bureaucratic thoroughness. How long had Elena been working 2 jobs? Had Sofia ever been left unsupervised? Were there any relatives who could provide additional support? Had Elena sought counseling for herself or Sofia following her husband's death? Each inquiry felt like an assault on the life they'd built, reducing their careful progress to a series of checkboxes on a government form. Sofia listened to this interrogation with growing distress, finally interrupting with the clear voice of a child who'd had enough of adults making decisions about her life without including her perspective. "Excuse me, Mr. Peterson, but I think you're missing the point." The social worker looked down at her with the expression adults reserve for children who speak out of turn. "What point is that, Sofia?" "The point is that my plan worked. Before Mr. Marcus started coming around, Mama cried herself to sleep and we didn't have enough money for groceries, and I was scared all the time that something bad would happen. Now Mama smiles when she cooks dinner and we play board games on Sunday afternoons, and when I have bad dreams, there's someone besides Mama to make me feel safe. I fixed our family by finding the right person to love us. Why is that wrong?" The simple honesty of Sofia's explanation hung in the air like a challenge to the adult world's tendency to complicate things that should be straightforward. Here was a child articulating what the bureaucracy couldn't quantify: that love, when it appears in unexpected forms, has the power to transform lives in ways that government programs and official interventions never could. But Peterson remained unmoved by Sofia's logic. "The concern, Sofia, is that children shouldn't have to fix their families. Adults should be responsible for providing stability and security without placing that burden on their children." "But what if the adults are doing their best and it's still not enough?" Sofia asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. "What if sometimes kids can see solutions that grown-ups miss because grown-ups are too scared or too proud to ask for help?" Alina knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close with protective instincts that had been honed by 3 years of single motherhood. "Mia, Mr. Peterson is just doing his job. He wants to make sure you're safe and happy." "I am safe and happy," Sofia said, looking directly at Peterson. "I'm safer and happier than I've been since Daddy died. Why would you want to change that?" Peterson's tablet chimed with what sounded like an official notification. He read the screen, his expression shifting from bureaucratic efficiency to something approaching surprise. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm showing here that your financial situation has recently stabilized. Your rent is current, your utility bills are paid, and you've reduced your work schedule at the cleaning service to part-time." Elena felt Marcus's hand brush against hers, a gesture of support so subtle that Peterson might have missed it entirely. "Yes, that's correct. I've been able to cut back on some of my extra work because I have more support now." "What kind of support?" Elena chose her words carefully, aware that her answer could determine whether Sofia remained in her custody or disappeared into the foster care system. "Emotional support that reduces my stress and helps me make better decisions. Practical support that means I don't have to choose between spending time with Sofia and keeping our household functioning. The kind of support that comes from not having to carry everything alone anymore." Marcus stepped closer to Elena, not quite touching, but close enough to convey solidarity. "I know this situation might look unconventional from the outside, but sometimes the best solutions don't follow traditional patterns. Sofia didn't just ask me to marry her mother. She asked me to become part of a family that needed someone who would choose to care about them. And that's exactly what happened." "You're saying you're planning to marry Mrs. Rodriguez?" The question hung between them like a bridge they hadn't quite figured out how to cross. They'd been moving towards something deeper than friendship, but marriage felt like a word too big for the careful steps they'd been taking. Yet in this moment, with Sofia's future hanging in the balance, Marcus found himself speaking from a place of certainty he hadn't known he possessed. "I'm saying I love this family," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "I love Elena's strength and kindness and the way she puts Sofia's needs before her own every single day. I love Sofia's courage and intelligence and her faith that good people exist when you need them most. And yes, I'm planning to ask Elena to marry me when the time feels right for both of us." Elena's breath caught, not because the declaration was unwelcome, but because hearing it spoken aloud made something that had been growing slowly between them feel suddenly powerfully real. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held gratitude. and love and a dozen questions they'd have to answer when this bureaucratic nightmare ended. Sofia's face lit up with triumph and vindication. "See? I told you my plan would work. I told you Mr. Marcus was the right person to love us." Peterson made more notes, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson, you understand that marrying someone to provide stability for their child is not the same thing as marrying someone because you want to spend your life with them. With respect, Mr. Peterson, I think you're underestimating both my intelligence and my integrity. I'm not some stranger who got manipulated by a child's request. I'm a man who spent 3 weeks getting to know an extraordinary woman and her remarkable daughter, who discovered that they'd already made space in their lives for someone to love them completely. Sofia didn't trick me into anything. She introduced me to the family I didn't know I was looking for." Elena found her voice, strengthened by Marcus's declaration and her own growing certainty about what they were building together. "Mr. Peterson, I understand that Sofia's initial approach might have seemed concerning to an outside observer. But what you're witnessing isn't the result of poor parenting or a child in crisis. It's the result of raising a daughter who believes problems can be solved, who has faith in people's capacity for goodness, and who loves her family enough to take action when she sees we need help." Furthermore, Elena continued, her nurse's training helping her organize her thoughts under pressure. Sofia has never been unsupervised, has never missed school, has never gone without food or medical care. Her grades are excellent, her teacher describes her as kind and helpful, and her behavior at home is age-appropriate in every way except for her unusual maturity in recognizing what our family needed. Peterson consulted his tablet again, scrolling through what appeared to be additional reports. "I have documentation here from Sofia's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, indicating that Sofia has seemed happier and more settled in recent weeks. Her academic performance has improved, and she's been more social with her classmates." Sofia nodded vigorously. "Because I'm not worried all the time anymore. When you're scared your mama might get sick from working too much, or that you might have to move away from your friends because you can't pay rent, it's hard to concentrate on spelling tests. But now I know someone else is helping take care of us, so I can just be a kid again." The social worker's expression began to soften slightly, though his professional demeanor remained intact. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask directly, do you feel that your daughter's action in approaching Mr. Thompson was appropriate?" Elena considered the question seriously, weighing her answer with the care of someone whose words could change everything. "Mr. Peterson, if my 8-year-old daughter had approached a stranger and asked him to take her somewhere, or give her money, or keep secrets from me, I would be horrified and we would be having a very different conversation. But what Sofia did was identify someone whose character she'd observed and trusted, and she asked him to consider caring about our family. She didn't ask for anything inappropriate, didn't put herself in danger, and didn't act without letting me know what she'd done. She asked a stranger to marry you. She asked someone she'd carefully chosen to consider whether he might want to be part of our lives. The marriage part was her 8-year-old understanding of how adults make families official, but the real request was for someone to choose us, to see value in loving us. And as it turns out, she chose exactly the right person." Marcus stepped forward, addressing Peterson with the straightforward honesty that had made Sofia trust him in the first place. "Sir, I've been divorced for 4 months. I've had plenty of opportunities to date, to jump into relationships with women who wouldn't come with the complexities of single motherhood and financial pressures. I'm here because Sofia was right about what her family needed, and right about my character, and right about the possibility that sometimes the best love stories begin with someone brave enough to ask for what they need." Sofia tugged on Peterson's sleeve with the persistence of a child who'd been listening to adults talk about her without including her input. "Mr. Peterson, can I ask you something?" "What is it, Sofia?" "Do you have kids?" Peterson hesitated. "I have a daughter. She's about your age. If your daughter was scared that something bad might happen to you, and she figured out a way to find someone good to help take care of your family, would you be proud of her for being smart and brave, or would you be mad at her for trying to solve grown-up problems? The question hung in the air with devastating simplicity. Peterson looked down at Sofia, really seeing her for the first time as a complete person rather than a case file, recognizing in her eyes the intelligence and love that had motivated her actions. "I would be proud of her," he admitted quietly. "Then why can't you be proud of me?" Peterson was quiet for a long moment, consulting his tablet one final time before closing it with a decisive click. "Mrs. Rodriguez, based on my observations today, I don't see any evidence of neglect, inappropriate supervision, or a child in distress. What I see is a family that has found an unconventional but apparently effective solution to their challenges." Elena felt her knees nearly buckle with relief, Marcus's hand finding hers and squeezing gently. Sofia grinned with the satisfaction of someone whose faith had been vindicated. "However," Peterson continued, "I will be conducting a follow-up visit in 60 days to ensure that this arrangement continues to serve Sofia's best interests. If there are any changes in the household composition, living situation, or Sofia's well-being, please contact my office immediately." He handed Elena a business card and gathered his papers with the efficient movements of someone ready to move on to the next case. "Sofia, I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you can call the number on that card and someone will help you." "Thank you," Sofia said politely, "but I don't think I'll need to call. I already found someone to help." U.S. After Peterson left, the three of them stood in the kitchen surrounded by the debris of interrupted normalcy. Cabinet handles scattered on the counter, homework abandoned on the table, dinner forgotten on the stove. The silence stretched until Sofia broke it with characteristic directness. "So are you really going to marry Mama, Mr. Marcus?" Marcus looked at Elena, seeing in her face the same mixture of hope and uncertainty he felt in his own chest. "Sofia, that's something your mama and I need to talk about together, privately. But what I can tell you is that I meant what I said to Mr. Peterson. I love both of you, and I want to be part of your family in whatever way feels right for all of us." Elena stepped closer to Marcus, taking his other hand and creating a circle of connection that included all three of them. "I love you too," she said quietly. "I love your kindness and your patience and the way you see the best in both of us. I love that you didn't run away when an 8-year-old asked you to marry her mother, and I love that you stayed even when it got complicated." Sofia bounced on her toes, barely containing her excitement. "Does this mean my plan worked completely? Are we going to be a real family?" "We're already a real family, Mia," Elena said, looking around their small apartment that somehow felt more spacious now, filled with love instead of fear. "We just need to figure out the details of how to make it official." Marcus picked up his scattered tools, but instead of putting them away, he set them on the counter and turned to face both Elena and Sofia. "Before we figure out anything else, there's something I want to ask you both." He knelt down so he was at Sofia's eye level, including her in this moment as she'd included herself in every other important decision affecting their family. "Sofia Rodriguez, you asked me to marry your mother, and I said I'd try to love her. But what I discovered is that I don't just love your mama. I love you too, and I love the family we're building together, so I have a question for you." Sofia's eyes widened with anticipation. "If I marry your mama, that would make me your stepfather. How would you feel about having me as your dad?" Sofia launched herself into Marcus's arms with enough force to nearly knock him over, wrapping her small arms around his neck and holding on like she'd been waiting her entire life for someone to ask her that question. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, I want you to be my dad. I want us to be a family for real, not just for dinner 2 nights a week." Marcus stood up, still holding Sofia, and reached for Elena's hand. "And Elena Rodriguez, I know this isn't the most romantic proposal, in the world, and I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks, but I also know that some of the best decisions happen fast when they're the right decisions." Elena laughed through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Are you asking me to marry you in our kitchen while holding our daughter and surrounded by unfinished cabinet repairs? I'm asking you to marry me anywhere you'll say yes. Kitchen, courthouse, church, or the middle of Main Street. I'm asking you to build a life with me that's big enough for all the love we have to give each other." "Yes," Elena said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, we'll build a life together. Yes to all of it." Sofia cheered and clapped while still wrapped around Marcus's neck, the sound echoing off the kitchen walls and probably reaching their neighbors, who would undoubtedly wonder what celebration was happening in apartment 247. 6 months later, they were married in the same hospital conference room where Sofia had first explained her plan to bring them together. Mrs. Washington served as Elena's matron of honor. Jake Miller stood as Marcus's best man, and Sofia carried a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. The ceremony was brief and simple, witnessed by the small community of people who'd watched their unlikely love story unfold. But the real celebration happened afterward, in their new house across town where Marcus had combined his savings with Elena's determination to create something neither of them could have built alone. Sofia had her own room for the first time in her life, painted yellow like sunshine because Marcus remembered Elena's favorite color. Elena quit her second job and went back to school for her nurse practitioner degree, supported by a husband who understood that investing in her dreams was investing in their future. And every Tuesday and Friday evening, they cooked dinner together in a kitchen big enough for 3 people to work without bumping into each other, telling the story of how they met to anyone who would listen, never failing to credit an 8-year-old girl whose faith and love had transformed 3 broken lives into one complete family. Sofia grew up knowing that sometimes the most important changes begin with a child's courage to ask for what they need, that good people exist when you're brave enough to look for them, and that families can be built as well as born when people choose to love each other completely. And in Millfield, Ohio, whenever someone mentioned the unusual beginning of the Thompson family, Sofia would smile and say that there was nothing unusual about it at all. Sometimes she'd explain, love just needs a little help getting started. And sometimes the person brave enough to provide that help happens to be 8 years old with a good plan and an unshakable belief in happy endings. Marcus and Elena never forgot that their love story began with their daughter's wisdom, and they spent the rest of their lives trying to be worthy of the faith a little girl had placed in the power of asking strangers to choose love over loneliness, connection over safety, and the beautiful complexity of family over the simple ease of remaining alone. 2 years had passed since that November evening when an 8-year-old girl had walked into a hospital cafeteria and asked a stranger to save her family. Now 10-year-old Sofia Rodriguez Thompson stood in the backyard of their new house, watching her stepfather teach her best friend Maya how to build a birdhouse while her mother tended to the vegetable garden they'd planted together last spring. The scene felt so perfectly normal that Sofia sometimes forgot how extraordinary the path that had brought them here actually was. The house itself told the story of their journey better than words ever could. Marcus had found the property 6 months after their engagement, a 1950s ranch that had been neglected for years, but had good bones and enormous potential. Together, the 3 of them had transformed it from a foreclosure listing into something that felt like home in ways their small apartment never could have. Elena's yellow kitchen, Sofia's purple bedroom with built-in bookshelves, Marcus's workshop in the converted garage where Sofia learned the difference between Phillips head and flathead screwdrivers while Elena mastered the art of reading blueprints. Every room bore evidence of their collaborative efforts. The living room walls displayed Sofia's artwork alongside photographs from their courthouse wedding and the family vacation to Disney World that had been Elena's first real break from work in 5 years. The dining room table, built by Marcus from reclaimed barnwood, seated 8 people comfortably because Elena had insisted they needed space for the community they were building. The master bedroom held Elena's nursing textbook stacked beside Marcus's construction manuals, their different worlds merged into one shared future. But it was the kitchen that truly captured who they'd become as a family. Larger than their entire former apartment, it had become the heart of their home in ways that went far beyond cooking. This was where Sofia did homework while Elena studied for her nurse practitioner exams, and Marcus planned renovation projects for his expanding business. This was where they hosted Sunday dinners for Mrs. Washington, Jake Miller, and whatever collection of friends and neighbors needed a place to belong. This was where they'd celebrated Sofia's acceptance into the gifted program at school, Elena's graduation with honors, and Marcus's decision to hire 3 new employees to handle Thompson Construction's growing client list. The kitchen had also become an informal counseling center for other families facing crises similar to what they'd experienced. Elena's colleagues at the hospital knew to refer struggling single mothers to the Thompson house, where they'd find not judgment but practical advice, shared resources, and living proof that unconventional solutions sometimes worked better than traditional approaches. Marcus had developed a reputation for hiring single fathers and young men aging out of foster care, teaching them construction skills while Elena helped them navigate healthcare systems and educational opportunities. On this particular Saturday afternoon, they were hosting what had become their monthly community gathering, a potluck dinner that typically drew 20 or 30 people from across Millfield's diverse neighborhoods. The tradition had started accidentally when Sofia invited her entire class to her 9th birthday party, not understanding that their new house could actually accommodate that many people. Elena and Marcus had scrambled to prepare food for 30 children and their parents, discovering in the process how much they enjoyed bringing people together. Sofia moved through the backyard with the confidence of a child who'd learned that her voice mattered, that her ideas had value, that the adults in her life would listen when she identified problems that needed solving. At 10, she developed into exactly the kind of person her 8-year-old self had been trying to become: thoughtful, observant, willing to take action when she saw people struggling. "Maya," Sofia called to her friend who was struggling to align the birdhouse sides properly. "Remember what Mr. Marcus taught us about measuring twice and cutting once? Same thing applies to gluing. Make sure everything fits before you make it permanent." Maya Rodriguez, no relation despite the shared last name, had become Sofia's closest friend after her parents' divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. The 8-year-old reminded Sofia so much of herself 2 years earlier that she'd appointed herself as unofficial mentor, teaching Maya the art of identifying trustworthy adults and asking for help when needed. "Sofia's right," Marcus confirmed, looking up from where he was helping Maya's younger brother build a simpler project. "Good construction is about patience and precision. Rush the process, and you'll spend twice as much time fixing mistakes." Elena emerged from the kitchen carrying a pitcher of lemonade and wearing the kind of relaxed smile that had become her default expression since stress stopped being her constant companion. Her face had filled out slightly over the past 2 years, the sharp angles of exhaustion softened by adequate sleep and regular meals. She'd cut her hair shorter for convenience while juggling work and school, but it framed her face in a way that made her look younger, more vibrant. "How's the construction crew doing out here?" she asked, distributing glasses of lemonade with the automatic grace of someone who'd learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced. "Maya's being a perfectionist, which is exactly what we want in a carpenter," Marcus replied, accepting his glass with a quick kiss on Elena's cheek that still made Sofia smile every time she witnessed it. Sofia's been giving expert advice, and Tommy's discovered that he prefers destruction to construction. 6-year-old Tommy Chen, Maya's brother, had indeed abandoned his birdhouse project in favor of enthusiastically dismantling a pile of scrap wood with a child-sized hammer. His approach to problem-solving involved maximum force and minimum patience, the opposite of his sister's careful deliberation. Different learning styles. Elena observed with the clinical objectivity of someone who'd completed 2 years of advanced nursing education. Tommy's kinesthetic, Maya's visual. Sofia's a natural teacher who adapts her communication style to whatever the other person needs. Sofia beamed at the assessment. I learned that from watching you, Mama. You explain things differently to Mrs. Patterson than you do to Dr. Williams, but you make sure everyone understands what they need to know. The observation was typical of Sofia's growing ability to analyze interpersonal dynamics with sophisticated insight. She developed into the kind of child who noticed when adults were struggling and offered help before being asked, who remembered details about other people's lives and checked in when someone seemed upset, who approached new situations with curiosity rather than fear. Marcus set down his tools and moved to Elena's side, slipping an arm around her waist with the comfortable intimacy of people who'd learned to be partners in every aspect of their lives. Speaking of Dr. Williams, how did your clinical rotation go this week? Elena's face lit up with the excitement she always showed when discussing her work. Incredible. I got to assist with a complex cardiac case, and Dr. Williams let me take the lead on patient afterward. The family had so many questions about post-operative care, and I was able to walk them through everything step by step. It reminded me why I wanted to become a nurse practitioner in the first place, which is because I love the intersection of clinical expertise and human connection. Doctors diagnose and prescribe, which is crucial, but nurse practitioners get to spend time with people to really understand how illness affects their entire lives, not just their immediate symptoms. Sofia had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times, but she never tired of seeing her mother's passion for her chosen profession. Elena's decision to return to school had been the right one for their entire family, creating a future that held more promise than any of them had dared to imagine during those desperate months in the apartment. The financial stability that had seemed impossible 2 years ago now felt secure in ways that went beyond Marcus's steady income from the construction business. Elena would graduate with her nurse practitioner degree in 8 months immediately, qualifying for positions that paid twice her current salary while offering the kind of intellectual challenge she craved. Marcus had expanded Thompson construction into commercial renovation projects, developing a reputation for quality work that kept them booked months in advance. But more importantly, they'd learned to operate as a true partnership, sharing responsibilities and decision-making in ways that made their individual strengths more powerful. Mama, Sofia said, settling into the lawn chair beside Elena's, can I ask you something about grown-up stuff? Always, Mia. What's on your mind? Maya's been really sad since her dad moved out, and her mama works late lots of nights now. Kind of like you used to. Maya asked me if I think her mama needs someone to marry, like how I found Mr. Marcus for you. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances, recognizing the delicate territory they were entering. Sofia's success in orchestrating their relationship had given her enormous confidence in her matchmaking abilities, but they'd been careful to help her understand that every situation was unique, that what had worked for their family might not be appropriate for others. What did you tell her? Elena asked gently. I told her that every family is different and that sometimes people need different kinds of help. Maybe her mama doesn't need a husband right now. Maybe she just needs friends or babysitters or someone to help with groceries when money's tight. Marcus felt a surge of pride at Sofia's thoughtful response. That's very wise, sweetheart. What else did you tell her? I told her that the most important thing is making sure Maya feels safe and loved, and that there are lots of ways to build support for families that don't involve marriage. Like how Mrs. Washington helped take care of me when Mama was working. Or how you fix things for people, even when they can't pay you right away. Elena reached over to squeeze Sofia's hand. You gave her excellent advice. Sometimes the best help we can offer other people is just being good friends and letting them know they're not alone. But Sofia continued with the persistence that had characterized her approach to problem solving since she was old enough to form complete sentences. If Maya's mama ever wants to meet someone nice, I've been watching the men at church, and Mr. Rodriguez, who teaches Sunday school, seems really good with kids, and he always helps clean up after coffee hour without being asked. Marcus laughed, recognizing Sofia's pattern of careful observation and strategic thinking. Sofia, you know that you can't orchestrate everyone's love life, right? Some people are meant to be together, and some people are meant to figure things out on their own. I know that. But I also know that sometimes good people just need a little push to find each other, like you and Mama. You never would have talked to each other if I hadn't introduced you. That's probably true, Elena admitted. We worked in the same building for months without really seeing each other. Sometimes it takes a different perspective to recognize possibilities we might have missed. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more guests for their monthly gathering. Mrs. Washington appeared at the back gate carrying her famous cornbread, followed by Jake Miller and his new girlfriend Sarah, a teacher at Sofia's school, who'd been gently integrated into their extended family over the past few months. Behind them came Dr. Patricia Chun from the hospital, Maya and Tommy's mother Linda, Father Miguel from St. Mary's, and half a dozen other people who'd become regular fixtures at the Thompson family table. Sofia jumped up to help organize the new arrivals, directing people toward the food table that Elena and Marcus had set up under the maple tree, making sure children found the game area they'd established in the far corner of the yard, introducing newcomers to longtime guests with the social grace of someone who'd learned that bringing people together was both an art and a responsibility. Elena watched her daughter navigate the social dynamics of 30 people with increasing amazement. This was the same child who'd been so worried about their family's survival that she'd approached a stranger in a hospital cafeteria. But she'd evolved into someone who created community wherever she went, who saw connections where others saw only differences. She's remarkable, Dr. Chun said, appearing beside Elena with a plate of food and an expression of wonder. I've been watching her work the crowd, and she has the emotional intelligence of someone twice her age. She remembers details about everyone's lives, asks thoughtful questions, makes people feel valued and heard. She's always been observant, Elena replied. But I think what you're seeing is the result of a child who learned early that paying attention to people's needs isn't just kind. It's sometimes necessary for survival. She developed those skills out of necessity, but now she uses them to take care of everyone around her. Marcus joined their conversation, balancing his own plate while keeping one eye on the various activities happening throughout the yard. Sometimes I wonder if we should worry about her taking on too much responsibility for other people's happiness. But then I see how naturally it comes to her, how much joy she gets from helping people connect, and I think maybe this is just who she's meant to be. A natural community builder, Dr. Chun observed. The world needs more people like Sofia, people who see isolation as a problem to be solved rather than an inevitable part of life. The afternoon progressed with the easy rhythm of people who'd learned to enjoy each other's company without agenda or expectation. Children played elaborate games of tag while adults shared stories about work, family, and the small victories and challenges that filled their daily lives. Elena found herself in conversation with Linda Rodriguez about the complexities of single motherhood, offering practical advice while carefully avoiding anything that might sound like pressure to change her situation. Marcus spent time with Jake and Father Miguel discussing a potential partnership to renovate the church's community center, a project that would provide employment for Thompson Construction, while creating better space for the food pantry and youth programs that served Millfield's most vulnerable residents. The conversation exemplified the way their family had learned to approach community involvement, identifying needs, leveraging their resources and skills, and building partnerships. That strengthened everyone involved. Sofia moved between groups with the fluid grace of someone who belonged everywhere, helping Mrs. Washington serve dessert, mediating a dispute between younger children, and engaging Dr. Chun in a serious discussion about the possibility of becoming a pediatric nurse practitioner when she grew up. Her ability to connect with people across age groups and backgrounds had become one of her defining characteristics, a skill that seemed to grow stronger with every social interaction. As the sun began to set and guests started gathering their dishes and saying their goodbyes, Sofia approached her parents with the expression she wore when she'd been thinking deeply about something important. "Mama, Mr. Marcus, I want to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" Elena asked, settling into her chair while Marcus perched on the arm beside her. "I've been thinking about that day when I asked Mr. Marcus to marry you, and I realized something. I didn't just want you to get married because I thought it would solve our problems. I wanted us to have what we have now." "What do we have now?" Marcus asked gently. Sofia gestured toward the backyard where their friends were slowly departing, calling out final conversations and promises to see each other soon. "We have people who choose to be part of our lives because they want to, not because they have to. We have a place where everyone feels welcome, where kids can be kids and grown-ups can ask for help when they need it. We have love that's big enough to include lots of people, not just the three of us." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at her daughter's articulation of what they'd built together. "You're right, Mia. We do have all of that. And the best part is it started with someone being brave enough to ask for what they needed. I asked Mr. Marcus to love us, and he said yes, but then we all kept asking for things. Mama asked for support while she went back to school. Mr. Marcus asked for help building the business. I asked for friends and for Maya's family to have people who cared about them. We all kept asking, and people kept saying yes." Marcus reached over to pull Sofia into a hug, marveling at her insight into the dynamics that had shaped their family's growth. "So what you're saying is that asking for help isn't something you do once when you're desperate. It's something you do all the time when you're building a life with other people." "Exactly. And the more people say yes to each other, the stronger everyone gets." Elena joined the hug, creating the three-way embrace that had become their family's signature gesture of connection and support. "Sofia, when you first asked Marcus to marry me, I thought you were being a child who didn't understand how complicated adult relationships are. But I think you understood something important that I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That love isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you choose, and something you ask for, and something you build with other people who are willing to say yes to caring about each other." As the last of their guests departed and they began cleaning up the remnants of another successful gathering, Sofia reflected on how different their lives had become since that November evening 2 years ago. The apartment in Riverside Complex had been replaced by a house with enough space for gardens and workshops and guest rooms for friends who needed temporary shelter. Elena's exhausted worry had been replaced by the confident energy of someone pursuing meaningful work while supported by people who believed in her dreams. Marcus's divorced loneliness had been replaced by the daily satisfaction of being needed and chosen by people who saw his worth clearly. But perhaps most importantly, Sofia's childhood fear that the adults in her life might not be strong enough to protect her had been replaced by the knowledge that she lived in a web of relationships sturdy enough to catch anyone who stumbled, flexible enough to adapt to changing needs, and generous enough to expand whenever someone new needed a place to belong. That night, after the dishes were washed and the yard furniture had been returned to its usual positions, the Thompson family sat on their front porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear November sky. Sofia was curled between her parents on the porch swing Marcus had built and Elena had painted, reading a book about famous women in medicine while her parents planned the week ahead. "Mama," Sofia said without looking up from her book, "do you ever miss the apartment?" Elena considered the question seriously. I miss how simple everything was when it was just the two of us figuring things out together. But I don't miss being scared all the time or feeling like we were just surviving instead of really living. What about you, Mr. Marcus? Do you miss being by yourself? Marcus thought about his empty house, his solitary dinners, his weekends with no one to talk to except the radio. I miss the quiet sometimes, but I've learned that there's a difference between peaceful quiet and lonely quiet. This is peaceful quiet, even with you reading and Mama grading papers and me planning tomorrow's work schedule. We're all doing our own things, but we're doing them together. Sofia nodded, satisfied with their answers. I don't miss the apartment, but I'm glad we lived there first. If we'd had this house from the beginning, I might not have realized how much we needed help, and I might not have been brave enough to ask for it. Are you saying that sometimes difficult situations are actually gifts because they teach us what we need to learn? Elena asked. Maybe, or maybe difficult situations are just difficult, but they show us how strong we can be when we have to be, and how much better everything gets when we find the right people to be strong with. As they sat together in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but connected by their shared understanding of how far they'd come, Sofia made a mental note to check on Maya's family tomorrow to see if there was anything practical she could do to help them through their current challenges. Not matchmaking, necessarily, but the kind of neighbor-helping neighbor support that had become second nature to her. Elena made her own mental note to call Linda Rodriguez and invite her to coffee, not to give advice, but simply to listen, to offer the kind of friendship that helped people feel less alone in their struggles. She'd learned from her own experience that sometimes the most valuable gift you could give another person was simply witnessing their efforts to build a good life under difficult circumstances. Marcus thought about the conversation he'd had with Father Miguel about the community center renovation, about the possibility of creating jobs for young men who needed second chances, about the satisfaction that came from building something that would serve the community for decades to come. His business had grown beyond his wildest expectations, but more importantly, it had become a vehicle for the kind of positive impact he'd never imagined when he was simply trying to make a living with his hands. The stars grew brighter as the evening deepened, and one by one they headed inside to prepare for another week of work, school, and the countless small decisions that would continue shaping their shared future. Sofia paused at her bedroom door, looking back at her parents who were discussing Elena's upcoming final exams with the easy collaboration of people who'd learned to support each other's dreams. "Mama, Mr. Marcus," she called softly. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to love us. And thank you for teaching me that asking for what you need isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of, because it means you believe good things are possible." Elena and Marcus looked at each other over Sofia's head, recognizing the wisdom of someone who'd learned early that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. That love wasn't something you waited to receive, but something you actively chose to create. "Thank you for being brave enough to ask," Elena replied, "and for showing us that sometimes the most important questions come from the people who are small enough to see solutions that adults miss." Sofia grinned and disappeared into her room, leaving her parents to marvel once again at the extraordinary child who'd orchestrated their love story with nothing more than faith in the possibility that good people might say yes if someone was courageous enough to ask them to choose love over safety, connection over isolation, and the beautiful complexity of family over the simple predictability of remaining alone. In her room, Sofia opened the notebook she'd kept since she was 8 years old, the one that had started with careful observations about Marcus Thompson's character and had evolved into a record of all the ways their family had grown and changed. Tonight's entry was simple but significant. 2 years later, and my plan is still working. But it's bigger now than just Mama and Mr. Marcus and me. It's about teaching everyone that love multiplies when you share it, that asking for help is brave, not weak, and that families can be built by anyone willing to say yes to caring about each other. She closed the notebook and settled into bed, surrounded by the sounds of home. Elena reviewing nursing protocols at the kitchen table, Marcus organizing tools for tomorrow's job, the gentle hum of a household where people chose each other daily and worked together to build something beautiful from the ordinary moments of everyday life. And in Millfield, Ohio, the Thompson family slept peacefully, knowing that they'd created something worth protecting, something worth sharing, and something worth celebrating every day they were given to love each other freely and completely. 5 years had transformed Millfield, Ohio in ways both subtle and profound, but nowhere were the changes more evident than in the bustling offices of Thompson Construction and Community Development. What had started as a simple renovation company in Marcus's garage had evolved into something unprecedented in small industrial town, a business model that prioritized community healing alongside profit margins. The company headquarters occupied a beautifully restored brick building on Main Street that had once housed the town's largest factory, before economic downturns shuttered manufacturing across the Midwest. Marcus had purchased the abandoned structure for a fraction of its value and spent 3 years transforming it into something that served multiple purposes. The ground floor housed Thompson Construction's offices and showroom, displaying before and after photographs of renovation projects, alongside testimonials from clients whose lives had been changed through home improvements. The second floor contained Elena's nurse practitioner clinic, which had opened 6 months ago to serve uninsured and underinsured residents who couldn't afford traditional health care. The third floor operated as a community center, offering after-school programs, job training workshops, and meeting spaces for local organizations. 13-year-old Sofia Rodriguez Thompson moved through the building with the easy confidence of someone who'd grown up understanding that businesses could be forces for positive change rather than simply profit-generating enterprises. After school each day, she divided her time between helping Marcus review project proposals, assisting Elena with patient education materials, and coordinating the youth mentorship program she designed to connect middle school students with high school volunteers. The mentorship program had emerged from Sofia's recognition that many of her classmates were experiencing variations of the crisis she'd faced at 8 years old. Single parents overwhelmed by multiple jobs, families struggling with financial insecurity, children taking on adult responsibilities because the adults in their lives were barely surviving. Rather than waiting for official intervention programs that might or might not materialize, Sofia had created a peer support network that addressed immediate needs while building long-term resilience. "Miss Sofia," called 12-year-old David Kim as he entered the community center carrying a backpack that looked too heavy for his slight frame. "Can you help me with my science project? My mom's working late again, and I don't understand the instructions." Sofia looked up from the homework she'd been completing at one of the round tables they'd positioned throughout the space to encourage collaboration rather than isolation. "Of course, David. What's the project about?" "Ecosystems. We're supposed to design a sustainable environment that can support different types of organisms." David unpacked his materials with the careful movements of someone who'd learned to handle school supplies like precious resources. "I picked wetlands because Mr. Rodriguez said they're important for filtering water and providing habitat. But I don't know how to show all the connections between plants and animals and water quality." Sofia smiled, recognizing the complexity of the assignment and David's genuine interest in understanding ecological relationships. "That's a great choice. Wetlands are perfect examples of how everything in nature is connected. Kind of like how everything in communities is connected. Let's start by mapping out all the different organisms that live in wetlands. Then we'll figure out how they depend on each other." As they spread David's research materials across the table, Sofia found herself thinking about the parallels between ecological systems and the social networks that had sustained her own family through their transformation. Just as wetlands required diverse species working together to maintain balance, healthy communities needed people willing to support each other through different types of contributions. Elena appeared in the doorway of the community center, having finished her evening clinic hours and stopped to check on the after-school program before heading home. She paused to watch Sofia work with David, noting the patient way her daughter explained complex concepts and the gentle encouragement she offered when he struggled with difficult ideas. "How's the ecosystem project coming along?" Elena asked, approaching their table with the quiet energy that characterized her interactions with children. "Really good, Mrs. Thompson," David replied, using the formal address that felt more comfortable to him than Elena's repeated invitations to call her by her first name. "Sofia's helping me understand how all the animals and plants work together to keep the wetland healthy." "It sounds like Sofia's become quite the teacher," Elena observed, settling into the chair beside them. "What have you learned so far?" David's face lit up with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered that learning could be engaging rather than merely obligatory. "I learned that beavers are like ecosystem engineers because their dams create the perfect conditions for lots of other animals and plants. And I learned that even tiny organisms like bacteria are super important because they break down dead stuff and turn it into nutrients that plants can use." Sofia nodded approvingly. "And what else did we discover about how this connects to human communities?" "That people can be like ecosystem engineers too," David said with growing confidence. "Like how your family created this building that helps lots of different people, or how the mentor program connects older kids with younger kids so everyone learns better." Elena felt a familiar surge of pride at her daughter's ability to help others make connections between abstract concepts and real-world applications. Sofia had inherited Elena's gift for seeing patterns and Marcus's talent for building practical solutions, but she developed her own unique approach to education that seemed to help children understand complex ideas through experiential learning. "That's exactly right," Elena confirmed. "Healthy ecosystems and healthy communities both need diversity, cooperation, and people willing to play different roles to support the whole system." Marcus appeared in the doorway, tool belt still around, his waste from the renovation project he'd been supervising across town. His hair showed more gray now than it had 5 years ago, and his face carried the particular tiredness that came from managing a business with 43 employees. But his eyes still held the warmth that had convinced 8-year-old Sofia he was worth trusting with her family's future. "How's everyone doing up here?" he asked, surveying the community center where a dozen children worked on various projects, while high school volunteers provided assistance and encouragement. "David's designing an ecosystem that could teach urban planners a thing or two about sustainable development," Sofia replied, continuing to help David organize his research notes. "And Jessica's group is building a robot that can sort recyclables. And the 8th graders are working on a presentation about affordable housing solutions." Marcus joined their conversation, genuinely interested in David's project and impressed by the sophistication of the boy's thinking. "David, have you considered how your wetland design might apply to stormwater management in cities? A lot of urban areas are starting to use constructed wetlands to filter runoff and prevent flooding." David's eyes widened as he processed this new information. "You mean like cities could build wetlands on purpose to solve pollution problems?" "Exactly. And when we design sustainable communities, we think about all the same principles you're using in your ecosystem project. How do we create environments where different types of people and businesses and organizations can thrive while supporting each other?" Sofia watched this exchange with satisfaction, recognizing how naturally her parents had learned to turn everyday interactions into educational opportunities. The after-school program had evolved far beyond homework assistance into something that resembled a laboratory for exploring how children could become active participants in community problem-solving. "Mr. Thompson," David said, with the careful respect he showed to adults who took his ideas seriously. Do you think kids could help design better communities? Like, if adults asked us what we needed to feel safe and happy, we might have different ideas than grown-ups would think of. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances, both remembering the 8-year-old who'd approached a stranger in a hospital cafeteria because she'd identified a solution that the adults in her life hadn't considered. Sofia's original insight about children's capacity for creative problem-solving had become one of the foundational principles guiding their approach to community development. I think kids often see possibilities that adults miss because you haven't learned yet that some things are supposed to be impossible, Marcus replied. In fact, Thompson Construction has started including youth advisors on our community development projects, specifically because young people ask different questions and imagine different solutions. Sofia felt a warm glow of recognition at her stepfather's acknowledgement of her role in shaping their business philosophy. 3 years ago, she'd suggested that they survey children and teenagers about what would make their neighborhoods safer and more interesting. The responses had led to design innovations that adult planners hadn't considered: pocket parks with reading nooks, basketball courts with adjustable hoops for different ages, community gardens with plots specifically designated for school science projects. As the evening program wound down and families began arriving to collect their children, Sofia reflected on how different her life had become from what she'd imagined during those desperate months in the apartment. At 13, she had a clearer sense of her future goals than many adults. She wanted to study urban planning and child development, eventually creating programs that systematically included young people's voices in community design decisions. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Elena's return to school had required enormous sacrifices from all three of them, including 2 years of carefully managed budgets and schedule coordination that left little time for spontaneous fun. Marcus's business expansion had meant longer hours and increased stress as he learned to manage employees and navigate complex commercial projects. Sofia had shouldered more household responsibilities than most children her age, becoming expert at meal planning, laundry management, and the kind of emotional support that helped her parents through particularly difficult weeks. But every challenge had been balanced by victories that felt genuinely earned rather than simply lucky. Elena's graduation as valedictorian of her nurse practitioner program had been celebrated with a party that filled their entire backyard and spilled into the neighbors' yards as well. Marcus's recognition as Small Business Owner of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce had led to speaking engagements and consulting opportunities throughout the region. Sofia's acceptance into the state's most competitive summer program for gifted students had opened doors to educational experiences that seemed designed specifically for her unique combination of intellectual curiosity and social activism. "Sofia," Elena said as they prepared to lock up the building and head home for dinner, "I got a call today from Dr. Martinez at the university. She wants to interview you for an article she's writing about innovative youth programs." Sofia paused in her organization of David's ecosystem materials, processing this information with the careful consideration she'd learned to apply to unexpected opportunities. "What kind of article?" "She's researching community-based solutions to educational inequality, specifically looking at programs that engage young people as leaders rather than just recipients of services. Apparently, our after-school program has gained attention beyond Millfield." Marcus finished stacking chairs, enjoying their conversation, interested in any development that might affect Sofia's future opportunities. What would the interview involve? Mostly questions about how Sofia developed the mentorship program, what she's learned about effective peer education, and whether the model could be replicated in other communities. Dr. Martinez is particularly interested in Sofia's perspective on how children can contribute to community development when adults create appropriate structures for their involvement. Sofia considered this opportunity with the analytical approach she'd developed for evaluating commitments that might take time away from her existing responsibilities. Would the article help other communities start similar programs? Potentially. Dr. Martinez works with school districts across the Midwest, and she's always looking for research-based models that districts can adapt to their specific needs. Then I'll do the interview. But I want to make sure she understands that the mentorship program works because it's part of a bigger system. Kids need to see that their voices matter to adults, not just to other kids. And adults need to be willing to change their approaches based on what children tell them. Alina smiled at her daughter's sophistication and thinking about systems level change rather than isolated interventions. I'll let Dr. Martinez know you're interested, and I'll make sure she understands that you want to discuss the program within the context of community-wide approaches to supporting families. As they walked to their cars in the early evening light, Sofia found herself thinking about the conversation with David and his excitement about ecosystem engineering. The parallel between ecological balance and community health had become increasingly important to her understanding of how sustainable change actually worked. Individual success stories were inspiring, but lasting transformation required networks of support that could adapt to changing needs, while maintaining core principles of mutual care and shared responsibility. "Mama, Mr. Marcus," she said as they reached the parking area behind the building. "Can I ask you something about the future?" "Always," Alina replied, settling her work bag in the passenger seat of her Honda, which had been replaced twice in the past 5 years, but which still served as reliable transportation between the clinic, the community center and home. "Do you think what we've built here in Millfield could work in bigger places? Like, could cities learn from what we've done with combining business development and community support?" Marcus paused with his truck door half open, considering Sofia's question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think the principles could definitely scale up, but the implementation would look different in different places. What we've done works, partly because Millfield is small enough that people can know each other personally, where trust can be built through direct relationships. But," Alina added, "the core insight about integrating services and creating multiple ways for people to support each other, that's not limited by community size. It's about designing systems that recognize how interconnected people's needs actually are." Sofia nodded, satisfied with their responses, but still thinking through the implications. "I want to study how to adapt community development models to different environments. Not just copying what works in one place, but understanding the underlying principles well enough to help people create their own versions." As they drove home through the familiar streets of Millfield, past the houses Marcus had renovated, and the families Alina had treated, and the children Sofia had mentored, all three of them carried a quiet sense of accomplishment that went far beyond individual achievement. They'd created something together that enhanced not just their own lives, but the entire community's capacity for supporting families through difficult transitions. At dinner that evening, around the table Marcus had built from reclaimed wood, and which had hosted hundreds of conversations about everything from homework struggles to business expansion plans, Sofia shared the details of her day with the easy intimacy of someone who'd learned that family dinners were opportunities for connection rather than mere fuel consumption. "David's ecosystem project made me think about something," she said, serving herself from the pasta Alina had prepared while Marcus finished reviewing contractor proposals. "What if we created a map of Millfield that showed all the connections between different support systems? Like how the clinic connects to the after-school program, which connects to the construction training program, which connects to the job placement services." Alina and Marcus exchanged glances across the table, recognizing their daughter's gift for seeing patterns and connections that others might miss. "That's a fascinating idea," Alina said. "What would be the purpose of creating such a map?" "To help people understand how they're part of a bigger system, and to identify places where we could create new connections to make everything work better. Like, maybe there are families who use the clinic, but don't know about the after-school program. Or people who need job training but don't know how to access it. Marcus set down his fork, fully engaged with Sofia's concept. You're talking about systems mapping, which is something urban planners and community organizers use to understand how different services and resources relate to each other. It's a sophisticated approach to community development. Could we actually do it? Like, as a real project? I don't see why not, Elena replied. It would be a great way to evaluate how effective our different programs are and where we might need to add new services or create better connections between existing ones. Sofia's face lit up with the excitement she always showed when theoretical ideas became practical possibilities. And we could involve the high school students in collecting the data, which would teach them research skills while giving them a better understanding of how their community actually works. As dinner continued and the conversation expanded to include Marcus's latest commercial project and Elena's plans for expanding the clinic services, Sofia found herself reflecting on how naturally their family had learned to approach challenges as opportunities for creative problem-solving, rather than obstacles to be endured. The evening concluded with their established routine of individual activities in shared space, Elena reviewing medical journals while Sofia completed homework and Marcus planned the next day's work schedule. But tonight, each of them carried an awareness that their individual efforts were part of something larger, something that had grown from one child's courage to ask for help into a model of community development that was attracting attention far beyond their small Ohio town. Later, as Sofia prepared for bed in the room that had evolved from a simple bedroom into a combination study space and workshop for her various community projects, she opened the notebook she'd been keeping since she was 8 years old. Tonight's entry reflected on the day's conversations and her growing understanding of how small actions could create lasting change. 5 years ago, I asked Mr. Marcus to marry Mama because I thought that would solve our problems, she wrote. But what actually happened was much better than what I asked for. We didn't just solve our problems, we learned how to prevent other families from having the same problems, and we created ways for people to support each other through whatever challenges they face. I asked for one person to help our family, and instead we built a whole community of people helping each other. She closed the notebook and settled into bed, surrounded by the sounds of home, Elena making final notes in patient files, Marcus organizing tools for tomorrow's work, the gentle rhythm of a household where people had learned to balance individual goals with collective well-being. And in Millfield, Ohio, the Thompson family slept peacefully, knowing that they'd transformed their personal healing into community healing, their individual success into systemic change, and their original plea for help into a model of how people could choose to care for each other across all the differences that might otherwise divide them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.